We're going to talk about technology, innovation, and impact. You're going to hear similar themes, though, about unlocking potential and how we can all play a role. I do want to thank Brighton Solar, who is our sponsor for this panel. Thank you for your support. We appreciate it. So our moderator today is Tim Hade. I've got it for her. Our moderator today is Tim Hade. He is the co-founder of Scale Microgrids, a company advancing resilient distributed energy systems that help communities, businesses, and critical facilities access cleaner and more reliable power. He's a recognized leader in energy innovation and microgrid development. He has spent his career helping scale practical, clean energy solutions that strengthen both sustainability and energy resilience. I'm going to hand off this mic and sit myself down.
Yeah, I don't know about all that, but I'm really happy to be here. So first of all, I'm a huge fan of Unite to Light and Megan, and thank you so much for putting today on. This is incredible. I thought this morning was so inspiring. And I hope to leave you with a little bit more inspiration. So look, the thing that we're talking about overall today, right, is there's two things that are true at the same time. The first thing is electricity, which is like, I don't know, we've had for 150 years. It's probably like the single thing that's improved quality of life for humanity more than anything else, right? Electricity is amazing. I tell my kids it's magic. And after being in electricity for 15 years, I think that's pretty much true. At the same time, there's 1 billion people on the planet that don't have access to electricity. And trying to square that is really challenging. And so, you know, over my time in this industry, I've had the opportunity to meet with a lot of entrepreneurs. And you have this conversation about equity and energy abundance and all these types of things. And it's incredibly complicated. And 99% of the people that you have this conversation with run the other way. There's a handful of people that run towards the fire. And I'm very, very lucky to be joined by four of those folks today, folks that have done amazing work and are doing amazing work in this space. So I'm going to introduce them real quick, and then we're going to talk about innovation and how this whole thing works. First, Titus. So Titus is the founder of Solgenics, has been working with entrepreneurs across the world, especially in developing countries, for a long time to sort of help them figure out how to build businesses. Dan is the CEO of Dragon Q Energy. They're making an incredible new battery chemistry that's argon-based that y'all will hear all about. So this is my favorite part of the write-up that Megan gave me. So when she described Brent, I'm just going to read this because I can't describe him better. It's Brent Dehlsen is a Santa Barbara-based entrepreneur who seems to have a habit of choosing the most complicated and physically demanding hardware challenges possible. So I think that's an apt description. So, you know, Brent's had a really distinguished career spanning wind, and now is working on the cutting edge of wave energy. And then last but not least, Catherine, who is a legend in the battery industry. Catherine is the founder of a company called Simplify, which... Simplify Power, sorry.
Simplify your power.
Yes. She started the company in 2010, and when I tell you that starting a battery company in 2010 is crazy, it's a crazy thing to do in 2010. And not only did she do it, but she grew the company internationally. And has won. There's also like this page of all the awards Catherine has won, but I'm not going to read them all because that would be all 45 minutes. But she's won a ton of awards for her work in the space, and sold that company in 2021 and has been, you know, actively engaged in helping folks and building the next generation since then. So we have an amazing group here. So I want to start off by sort of talking about this intersection of innovation and impact. And I guess how I kind of wanted to start was thinking about the tangible impact some of y'all's work has had. So maybe to start, Catherine, can you just kind of give me a sense of, you know, how these projects you've built have impacted, you know, communities around the world?
Yeah. Simplify Power, you know, we chose from the beginning to not utilize cobalt because of challenges around thermal management, et cetera. And what that meant is we were working with lithium ferrophosphate, which had a greater thermal stability. That was very valuable when we started working first with U.S. military and Marine Corps on forward operating bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. Never thought I would work with the military because my vision was really to work, at that time, it was 1.2 billion people living beyond the grid without access. And with our portable mobile systems scaling up to 0.5 megawatt to 1 megawatt anywhere in the world, thermal regulation and stability was really critical. So we began to work with clinics from Nigeria. M1 is a company, a partner we had. I built partnerships all over the world with governments, for-profit, nonprofit, other manufacturers, equipment manufacturers. I pulled in Schneider in the early days to work with us to build these microgrids for clinics, hospitals. We worked in conflict zones, Myanmar. And to your question, I guess the impact was so apparent and direct. First of all, people have talked about the cost, the offset of cost of fuel, whether it's the kerosene or any kind of fuel to bring power to generators for clinics, schools, hospitals. That's immediate. But then these centers become hubs for all kinds of economic activity. And that's why I was able to pull in very often local governments to support these projects, because the economic impact was tremendous. And it touched the children, it touched women, men, fathers, but these hubs where energy was available became kind of a center of activity that propagated so many other opportunities. So I'll stop there.
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. And so I guess that's the perspective from the project standpoint. And I guess if I put my venture capitalist hat on a little bit, for a minute, if you walked into my office and pitched me on this crazy idea, I would look at your resume and I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, she can probably pull this off.
Oh, really?
But I guess,
I just know what they said.
Turning to you real quickly, Titus, right? You do a lot of work with entrepreneurs who don't necessarily have, the background or the pedigree or the resources that a lot of the folks maybe at UCSB would have. How has that experience been, working with these entrepreneurs in different countries and different areas of the world? And, talk a little bit about the work you're doing and sort of helping those folks get up the learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of concentrated on working with entrepreneurs, with local entrepreneurs, to make their businesses more viable. And a lot of it has to do with actually by using electricity to create added value for the local clients of theirs. So, for example, to give you an example, I mean, one of the companies I'm a partner of is a company called Promethean Power, and they use solar power for the dairy industry in India. And so one of the things that they do is that they, the dairy is kind of interesting. The dairy industry in India is the largest in the world, even larger than the United States. But they obviously use the milk for cheese and yogurt and all different kinds of things. But they obviously don't eat the meat, right? And so one of the things is these dairies are owned by, they're either government owned or they're privately owned. They're very, very large, but they all buy their milk from farmers that have less than 10 cows. And so it's a huge logistical problem that they basically have to, twice a day, these farmers come by with a can of milk and they drop off the milk. And it's a huge problem to actually get those to the huge dairies where they produce all these products. And so what this company does is they actually solar power, they cool the milk using solar energy. And by cooling the milk, the quality of the milk gets preserved much longer, which basically means that the local subsistence farmers, they get much more added value for the milk that they sell. And so a lot of it has to do, that was my impact, what I've seen by using power, a lot of this had to do by create added value for the local partners.
Makes a ton of sense. And I guess just to follow up on that, I mean, for the entrepreneurs who are actually on the ground doing this stuff, talk a little bit about how you help them. Like, where do they run into the biggest challenges, right? Obviously navigating a complex policy landscape and all these different businesses that you work with.
I mean, it's kind of funny, my background is actually, before I got into solar energy, I was actually working in the retail industry. So actually a lot of it has to do with distribution. And so that's a lot of things that I look at them as well, as in terms of how do they distribute their product? How do they commercialize their product? Because I'm really not an technical person. I'm more a business person, and so I really look at the way how they commercialize their product, how they go to the marketplace, and so that's one of the things that I'm concentrating on.
So fascinating. All right, so I want to shift gears just a little bit here and talk about scale, which I think is something that all of us have thought a lot about over the past decades. So Dan, I want to start with you. I mean, obviously you guys are bringing a pretty revolutionary technology to market here, and it's been proven out at the pilot level. Let's put it that way, right? You guys have had a lot of successful deployments. Now the challenge is, right, how do you go from having a handful of successful pilots to being able to do this in a way that really has an impact on potentially a global scale? Talk to me a little bit about like how you think about that challenge and how you're navigating it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And I feel like I found my people in this room, so thank you guys. And I talked with Catherine over coffee, and I keyed her to help advise our company and me as a founder, and then Titus as well. Yep. But to touch on our first pilots, we started with a prototype funded by the John Bauer Foundation in town, with assistance from Unite to Light, and then also the California Nanoscience Institute right here on campus. And with that prototype battery that we built, and then a power station that we put on top of it, the Palisades fires came along, and they were burning through most of Los Angeles, the Eaton fire and so on. And some of our advisors, twin sisters, called up and asked, like, you need to deploy in Malibu, like right now. Like, get your unit down there and deploy it. And we all got on the phone. Megan helped. We were calling all the dispatch centers and everything. We deployed our first unit in Malibu while the fires were still burning. And we had, driving in at that point, it was like the different circuses of fire, Forest Service and fire departments and everything, and all the vendors and suppliers. And we got right down in there, and there was no power. There was no connectivity, nothing in Malibu. And for 2 weeks, we were the most reliable power and Wi-Fi downtown Malibu. It's not something to get emotional about, but it represented a lot of work to get to that point. Now, yeah, thanks. It's very meaningful. Now to get towards scale and scale impact. Let's see. Yeah, so many things on my mind. I don't even know where to begin. Maybe you can help frame up some scenarios or something.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm better at building batteries than public speaking.
No. I mean, look, I guess the sort of the direction I'm heading with this, right, is obviously, for those who don't know Dan, he had this little like a garage, I guess, like incubator garage.
Well, we started at the CNSI, and then we were over to the facility here at the flight deck, little incubator. But I guess the early unit that we showed to Andrew McCullough and to Megan, they said, yeah, go ahead, keep building, and that's parlayed into a funded 8-unit project here in the county, and we just got notification that our batteries are shipping. We're building those first 8 power poles, and so that's one took a long time, 8 a little bit less, and then some of our customers are here. We're going to be deploying some in Liberia with Acon, and we're just finding that support. But to scale appropriately, and a lot of these concepts were already discussed here, but it's like reliable access to finance, maybe a simple solution that's understandable, that's repeatable, that's trusted. It's something that I talked about working with partners like Schneider. We have just to cover a little bit about the innovation part of it. Our battery was built to operate in the harshest environments, and our battery comes with an IP68 rating. So if you don't know what that means, it can survive underwater up to 2 meters for more than an hour. So our batteries can actually deploy below the surface of the Earth and act as a mounting point for this power structure. And that's important near shore. That's important where it's hot, where normal batteries might only last, I think, Anna, you might have referenced that a battery needs to be replaced every 5 to 7 years. Our target is 15. In my mind, 20 years from now, I'm going to meet someone and say, oh, our unit is 20 years old and it's still running. If you've ever seen a battery cell spec sheet, we've basically emulated a battery cell spec sheet as far as like charge rates and discharge rates and temperatures and other things, and we can put it underground and thermally regulate the battery for longevity. Yep.
Awesome. And so, I think, watching you guys on your journey, right, as you guys go from, pilot mode to sort of small commercial projects. And now I think you guys have a 9,000 square foot, manufacturing facility, and you're taking on sort of all these projects is an incredible journey.
Yep.
And we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I want to turn over to Brent here, because you're scaling in a different way, which is like the way you do things. You can't start small necessarily, right?
No, that's right. And I guess starting off, I'm a second generation wind farmer. So it's like going back to the 80s in our family history. So we have a couple cycles of going through this, and we're using that template for all of the technologies we're developing. And by and large, we're looking at trying to get all these technologies to be at a competitive cost of energy. So it's kind of for-profit, market-driven. However, we have a long history of working with the DOE, the CEC on early stage funding to stimulate that and get through that kind of valley of death of the initial engineering and cost and deployment. And from there, we try and get things to their commercial readiness and then go after private funding.
It makes a ton of sense. So just so we can level set with everyone, because I gave a very poor explanation of what you're working on. Can you talk a little bit about the projects you're working on right now?
So, well, historically it's been wind.
Yep.
Through a couple of iterations. Left that about 15 years ago, and since then been focused on marine energy and a complete pivot. But ocean current turbines, wave energy devices, and then adjacent technologies, submerged data center, RO, offshore RO, and a variety of other kind of additional applications of that energy that you would use, that you'd find in the marine environment.
It makes a ton of sense. And so I guess what I understand is kind of like Dan's roadmap for how to build a business, right? Which is you can go out with a cool technology, you can find some investors who are willing to write smallish checks, right, to get you to your prototype stage. Maybe there's some philanthropic dollars that come into that. You build it, you prove it out, you graduate to the next class of investor, and you just kind of work your way up, right? That's a roadmap I understand. When you guys go out for your pilot projects, you guys are not trying to raise, $1 million, right? It's these are big investments. So is it really like that relationship with the government that is that
it's
the key
not
to
always
it?
there. It's cyclical, so it's so policy dependent. So I mean, our business goes as policy is happening. So right now I'd say retrenching and focusing on markets that aren't contingent on that. Right now, we're primarily focused on our RO product, which will be deployed in New Zealand. We have a marine current turbine that will be deployed in the first quarter of next year, and a wave energy device that will hopefully be deployed this year. They're all at small scale, but they demonstrate kind of that first order of magnitude. And each one of those we've been working on for 10 to 15 years. So it's not a kind of an overnight thing. And it's our own capital. It's partnerships with industrials. We've worked with Mitsubishi and Microsoft on some of these things on their specific interests. And so a combination of all those funding sources to get us to where we are. And we look at ourselves as more of a lab to get things to a commercial scale. And so we have kind of a team of engineers that sometimes jump from different products depending on their skill sets. So we're pretty nimble in that regard, and we keep it pretty lean and tight.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really hard. So I guess in sort of building upon that, we've obviously had a very unstable political climate, at least at the federal level, here over the last decade. When you guys are talking about building projects that have potentially decade-long build cycles, how do you guys think about like navigating a policy environment where the president one day might be your biggest fan and the president the next day might not think you should be doing what you're doing?
I mean, it's hard on the R&D side, but ultimately we're still trying to have a cost of energy, if you will, that, you know, is competitive with incumbent energy, whatever that might be in that region. So that's the target. If we can demonstrate that to an investor with some confidence, then that unlocks some of the private funding. It's that initial R&D side. I mean, we're not through the woods on that, but it's, that's kind of where the vulnerability is. The Department of Energy nominally has been able to kind of withstand kind of, you know, changes in government over the years. I'd say it's an exception right now. We've seen some, you know, grant programs just completely evaporate, like most people have seen in different industries. But you know, for us, it's we still have some legacy grants that we're executing on, and from there we need to kind of jump to the next level.
Makes total sense. And then, you know, building on that, Catherine, so you obviously got Simplify Power to a point where a big private equity firm thought that just on, like, you know, a capitalist basis, it was a great investment and they bought it, but that wasn't always the case. And so in those early years, how were you figuring out how to get these projects, how to get the money to build these projects? Was it, you know, sort of a similar path, or what was kind of your wrinkle on that?
No, we weren't going big. We were, you know, it was incremental for us. So we had mobile portable packs, and my CTO, when I met him, these mobile portable packs with folding solar chargers were for the film movie industry. I didn't care about the film movie industry. I've lived overseas. I've traveled all over the world. For me, it was that last mile, and again, the 1.2 billion that lived beyond the grid. So we had the opportunity to generate a little bit of revenue with these mobile packs and solar. I made a deal with CTO to found the company and to begin scaling those packs. And the first scaling we did was for the Marine Corps and US Army. But because of those projects, we were very rapidly overseas. And then I began to build partnerships, again, with other equipment manufacturers, nonprofits, governments. So our scaling and how we built our factory floor out, it was all manual to start with. And I worked with family and friends. VCs, they didn't care about the last mile. They didn't care about, I started a nonprofit division of the company. Every year from our first year of founding, 2010, we gave 1% of top line revenue, not profit, top line revenue, to high impact projects all over the world. And I was saying to some of the students last night who were talking about, going into the nonprofit world and, you know, signing on to a life of poverty versus, you know, for-profit. And, you know, I just say that's bullshit. And, you know, I don't buy into my Silicon Valley brethren and how they build companies. I think innovation has every bit as much of how you build your company, the business model, your supply chain, conflict minerals, where are you getting your raw materials to the subcomponents and the suppliers you work with. It's, to me, that's very critical. And building incrementally one PO at a time from, you know, the US Army and then projects, governments overseas, and little by little working with friends and family and turning away from VCs, we were able to build out our factory. And I think it was, don't laugh, but it was like the 5th year when Tesla entered the market in 2015 with a Powerwall. We found it in 2009-10, so we've been at it. That's when we started to get enough volume and sales that we began to scale. And for me, you can't scale without the sales, you know? And so for me, incrementally meant strategic injections of capital from friends and family. Over 11 years, I raised 6.7 million. That's it. Company sold at a valuation of 100 million. Not bad for 11 years. So my message is, you know, this kind of divide that people think, oh, you have impact, nonprofit or for-profit. No, you can bring the two together. And so Simplify Power was giving away batteries. So anybody in the industry knows 9548, 9540 certification and testing. We would end up at any given year with our different models and scaling up to megawatt hour commercial systems or 500 or 200 kilowatt hour residential clinic systems, we would end up with half a megawatt hour of batteries we couldn't sell because they had been tested and put through the paces. And so my feeling was, contrary to my brethren, it's like, oh, you can't give away free batteries, no one will buy them. They find out. No, it's just the opposite. I started deploying these batteries, giving them away, maintaining them, guarantees that, that were consistent with test batteries. Those batteries are still in operation, and it's 2026, and these are from Myanmar to Haiti. We worked with the Haitian Health Foundation and powered their clinics and hospitals, to hundreds of clinics throughout Nigeria. So we truly were global, and for me it was, building incrementally, very strategically, working with friends and family. None of the VCs cared about anything I did, and it was really bringing that, what you think of as nonprofit, high impact with for-profit. And hey, I get to tell a story. I sold it at a great profit and made a lot of money for our investors. So I guess that's what I wish for more in the clean tech space, but every company has an opportunity, if not a responsibility, to make an impact. If you look at your where your equity is in the company, every employee in Simplify had equity in the company, from my frontline manufacturing crew to my shipping crew. And so everybody is on board and has what I call the give a shit factor. They are all part owners. And this is not the way companies are run typically. Yeah. So I called it a grand experiment. And I'm advising entrepreneurs and up-and-coming technologies and companies now, and encouraging them to see their companies in a similar way. Yeah. That, high impact and profitable. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so, yeah. My only mistake was not bringing a pen, because I should have written a bunch of that down.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess, Titus, just before we move into the final question, I want to get your perspective on this, because I think, what Catherine just described, I think, has become like a common recipe for impact entrepreneurs, which is essentially, in order to get capital, you have to trick investors into believing that it's like going to make you a lot of money, so then you can afford to build the technology that then you want to use to have impact, right? And it's this kind of weird game you play. How does that work with the entrepreneurs that you guys work with who are like impact driven?
I mean, my experience sort of with the entrepreneurs, I mean, it's sort of this saying, do you bet on the horse or do you bet on the jockey, right? And a lot of times it's obviously the jockey that you bet on, and the innovation, that the ideas that they come up with to finance their companies, because it is very, very difficult, especially if you go more into the rural areas, because a lot of times the further you go away from cities, the harder it becomes. Because, for example, one of the things that people talk about, microcredit. I mean, microcredit is obviously a useful tool, but most of the microcredit is in cities. They don't really go out into rural areas very much. I mean, it's much, much harder to find microcredit organizations to do that. So we basically found that it's, was always a huge, challenge for them to do it. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, for example, one of the experiences that we had, that one of the entrepreneurs, he actually started this in Honduras. They actually started to use the Kiva line as for financing their clients. And it's actually very interesting, because if you actually go to the Kiva website, you actually see, I mean, Kiva started out with raising money for microcredit organizations, and they actually, in this particular case, they now have local partners, and he was able to engage them in that, so that he's a local partner, and they will actually finance with loans their clients. And so he's obviously responsible as a company to give out the loans and to recover the loans, but they probably do 50% of his working capital. Does Kiva does that? And so that's obviously, for them, it's a huge help to actually get all these clients in these rural areas in Honduras financed. But you have to be very open-minded and sort of think a little bit out of the box in terms of seeing what kind of tools are there that I can use that maybe have been used differently in the past, but that could apply to my business. So that's sort of what I found that has been very, very helpful in this arena.
The entrepreneurial hustle. Awesome. So, all right, I want to leave time for questions, although I could talk to you all day. So I got one last one that I want to sort of go down the line on. So I'll start with you, Dan. You're obviously in the middle of this right now. When you set out to build an impact-driven climate tech company, we've talked a little bit about today about how brutally challenging that is. What's missing? Like what's the one thing right now in sort of the investment ecosystem or the broader political ecosystem that's, you know, a real challenge for you that everyone should know about so we can go try to help you and fix it?
Well, everything that's been mentioned so far is, you know, the part of the challenge, and it makes me feel good, and you're led by a very good example, and that gives me strength to carve out our own path. And it's not always, doesn't always look like what you might think. And we had a very early investor, Ron Boehm. A lot of people know him here in this room, and he gave me the words, or the strength to say, we may never receive investment from venture capital. That's not to say we like them or don't like them, but we may never receive VC funding. And our private individuals, high net worth individuals, and so on. But kind of along those lines, we're like inventing the wheel there. Like there's no systematic approach to reaching high net worth individuals. And if there is a systematic approach, I'd certainly like to know what it is.
I can make introductions.
Yeah, please. Just kind of along those lines, I'm open and as a resource to anyone in this room or anyone in your Rolodex. You know, we're here. And then also asking for help. Get our company through those early stages. Yeah, because we're very early in our arc, where you just described like the whole life cycle of your company. We're at that early scrappy stage, and we're putting the cart before the horse with the hiring, with the facility, all this other stuff, and we're certainly, risk on is right now. Yeah, so yeah, we could use all the help we could get.
Awesome. Titus, what do you think? Like, what's one thing we can do?
One of the things that I would say, and it sort of mirrors what also was being said before in other groups, is the fact that we found a lot of times when you actually fundraise for energy projects, especially in emerging markets, a lot of times what you hear from funders, they say, oh, we only fund education, or we only fund health, or whatever, you know. And the reality is it's all interconnected, right? I mean, if you don't have access to electricity, education is not going to be as good, health is not going to be as good. I mean, those are the kind of things that people are sort of sometimes very focused in one particular area, and you say, look, you maybe should take a little bit of a broader look in terms of how these things are all interconnected, and that you need to do a little bit of all of them together to be able to make sure that education and public health is also being ensured, right? So that's what I would say is probably the biggest challenge there, yeah.
Can I chime in with one
yeah,
last
please.
thought there? Yeah. We get so many no's. We have an abundance of no's from venture capital, high net worth individuals. But those people that give us the no's, they have an abundance of resources. And we're actually like flipping the script a little bit on the no's or the maybes. The maybes are really a no. Or the laters. We flip the script a little bit, and will actually be of interest to people in this room. We actually ask for a philanthropic donation to our partners. And if they give us the no, then we ask for them to fund a power station or a power pole. And then, the donation can be made to, Unite to Light, Solar Sisters, any number of the organizations in here. So that's something that we're doing. And then, there is a little bit of self-interest in there, because we can sell them a power station, but it goes out and does the work that it's intended to do. So we're okay with that path.
Makes a ton of sense. Catherine?
What's the question?
Just kind of like
missing?
one
Sorry.
thing that's missing. Yeah, like what's one thing that we could do as a society to make it easier for impact entrepreneurs to work in this kind of space?
For me, always thinking about the front line, in the U.S., manufacturing is really suffering, and we don't make what we consume anymore. And even in the energy storage industry, we're totally reliant on Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia had the vision to invest in the raw materials, the lithium, the cobalt, and the mining practices, the human rights abuses are horrific. So one of the goals for me when I founded Simplify Power was to manufacture in the US and begin to build out that capacity. That's why I'm involved with Binghamton University in upstate New York. They've been trying that, so for me, being a manufacturer and trying to build that expertise and capacity in the US and around the world, it's not a matter of not recognizing global market. But it was very, very frustrating, especially when you talk about scale. You know, how do you manufacture here? And really going against the tide of really slave wages all over the world. I mean, US companies are outsourcing as much as they can. Hell, you can outsource HR at this point because it's cheaper. And that's not what drives me, and I'm hoping that more and more US companies will look at manufacturing and producing goods here in the US.
Makes a ton of
With
sense. And then
international partners. Yeah.
last word, Brent, same question. So, you know, in your mind, what's something we can do better as sort of a collective society here?
Well, for us, it's always about predictability on policy. So as that, you know, shifts around,
I got that taken care of.
Yeah, thank you. There's some, California is pretty consistent in that regard, and we look at it from a diversified, way with, in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, other markets, that you just have to be nimble and kind of pivot to, as things go. And, but, predictability would be great. On the wind side, we had the production tax credit for many years, and that was only extended every time for about 2 years at a time. And that was always harrowing when when you're raising money and you have your market and you're trying to get your product out there. And the irony in that is there was big players in that industry that created that instability. They wanted that because it kept other people out of the market, and it was insane. And so there was a kind of a captive capital market from a few people that liked the unpredictability of that. But from a manufacturing perspective, it was a nightmare.
Makes a ton of sense. All right, I got the 5-minute warning here, so we're going to open it up for questions. Here, let me borrow. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, got a couple time for a couple questions. Anybody?
So, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank was just on the news the other day, and he was talking about the data centers, the energy, the usage of it, and that a lot of it is basically said propaganda from China. So I apologize I was late, but is there a answer to the data centers for the energy that it uses, and is there a answer on your end to help with that? I mean, is that true, number one? Is it really, or is it propaganda from China?
So, all right. So the first thing I'll tell you is you shouldn't listen to people that have less than 6 weeks of experience in the energy industry, and that guy's an idiot. But on the solution front,
I could take that a little bit. We're right at that tip of the spear right now. As we discussed earlier, my heart is in the deployments in developing countries. However, our technology scales and supports massive megawatt proportion batteries and supercapacitors and other things. And there is a real problem with from a power standpoint and a peak power, especially from these new AI factories and data centers that are coming online. And it's not just the base load; it's the some industry lingo is like spiky, erratic, cyclical peaks. And is there a solution? Yes, absolutely. We're working on it right now, and we have a supercapacitor product that we're scaling up, and it's rather sinister. It's very powerful. One of our engineers said, "Don't build it. It's going to explode machines, and people are going to get hurt." And I said, "Hey, I'll just calm down. The compute requires it, and we can build it, and let's get the guys in the middle, like Schneider, to build the what do you call it? The reference design." Yeah. A lot of people are working on it, and I'd say it's very real problem.
But I would say a lot of people are working on it, but why aren't the AI companies and those that are creating the demand, this excessive demand that it's displacing available energy for all of us, regular ratepayers? And so I really see a problem with the fact that the companies that are creating this demand aren't required. And we're talking about billion-dollar companies with
Trillion-dollar
excessive, okay, trillion, depending
BlackRock.
on which one. You know, they certainly have the resources. So it kills me to hear an entrepreneur or anybody in the energy industry, and we're all struggling to, you know, scale our companies and make an impact. But where the hell are they? They have the profits, and they should be required to invest in and build the infrastructure that supports so that our energy costs don't keep climbing, which in California are the most expensive in the country.
We're just starting to work with the at the state level, like state assembly members, and at Earth Day we met, it's like Greg Hart, and we're starting to get representation at the California Energy Commission. We're starting to get representation at the California Energy Commission, and from our perspective, and we're just a little guy, but we're supporting relief for the ratepayer, reduce rates, building the data center and the AI factory as the grid resource, as a grid forming resource, something that can restart the grid in a blackout, something that prevents ripples going back through the grid and things like that. And one unlock from our supercapacitor has really been a reference design, and then we ended up at the open compute calls where they're defining these standards, and we found an engineer, and he's putting these things on our plate right now. So it's very dynamic at Dragon Q right now. We have a lot there, but the solutions are coming, and we have the community in mind as well.
Yeah. Brent, I know you're working on this stuff, so last word.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some interesting bets being placed in that space. One of our competitors on the wave energy side, Peter Thiel, put $140 million into it. It's like $1 billion enterprise value now, which is astonishing. And we're focused a little bit more on the water consumption side. That's kind of a thing that has a big impact, and there's storm clouds on the horizon on that one. And so we've worked with Microsoft on the submerged data center, and they've kind of moved on from that. And so it's pretty dynamic on what's happening in that industry. So I'm not sure what'll happen, but there's a lot of action there.
All right, so in conclusion, listen to these folks and not the guy from Shark Tank. I think, do we have time for one more question? Yeah. All right, we're going to make...
Yeah, while we're on the topic of AI, I'm curious how you and your companies are leveraging AI as a co-creative thought partner for innovation. And Pandora's box is open. We're all using it, right? As a nonprofit individual, I use it every single day, have to get my job done because reduced staff, headcounts, and greater impact, right? So I'm curious how you are using it, and are you building your own LLMs on secure models? What does that look like?
Just a quick one to close us out. Who wants to go?
Yeah, we're right there. We're establishing company policies around it, and we're using it to record all our meetings, to train models on our company and things that we're talking about, and all our documentation. And we're not deploying or writing any particular language models, but we're thinking about it. We're discussing it as a team, and putting like company policy around it.
I mean, that's what I've seen as well. I mean, most of these companies obviously are smaller that I work with, but some of the solar companies have also seen that they exactly do that. They record everything, all the documentation, whatever. So whatever they need to know with regards to something that's happening within the company, they can go back to all the resources that they have discussed to help them in the decision-making process.
And there are a couple of companies I'm working with advising that actually, I believe it's Claude, the third tier. So they are engaging Claude, if that's how you phrase AI, engage it, but from a material sciences point of view, because it can scan so much data that's the result of testing and different metrics and environmental conditions. It's actually interesting in terms of propelling new ways of thinking, because it's coming up with things, whether it's true or not, or hallucination, or you have to, but that in itself is generating new ways of approaching different problems. So it's yeah.
And we can't reduce headcount, but we're using it to leverage our intelligent engineers and our trained staff, to pretend like we're a bigger company.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of creativity come out of our staff, but the flip side of that is I'm having to kind of vet that and fact check it and try and figure out what's real. So, it cuts both ways.
Let's thank our panelists.